Each spring, American gardeners invest substantial sums in seeds, young plants, and various horticultural supplies. We engage in tilling, planting, staking, and caging, only for the garden to perish by October. The following year, the cycle restarts with entirely new purchases. However, what if medieval farmers cultivated vegetables that endured longer than their descendants? Imagine vegetables that surpassed the height of apple trees and yielded harvests for 2 decades without needing to be replanted. Crops so enormous that their stalks served as walking sticks long after the harvest concluded. For over a millennium, from the monastic gardens of Switzerland to the humble plots of English peasants, these perennial behemoths sustained families across generations. They weren't mere annual crops. They were living assets that provided returns for decades. Then, with the advent of the seed industry, their existence was almost instantly forgotten. Today, you won't encounter a single one of these vegetables at any major home improvement store. So, what were these 10 medieval perennials that nourished Europe for centuries, and why did we abandon such enduring vegetables for crops that perish every winter? Act 1 delves into the tree vegetables, commencing with Charlemagne's directive. In the year 800, Charlemagne issued the Capitulare de Villis, a decree mandating the cultivation of specific vegetables on every monastery and royal estate. Yet, a detail your history teacher likely omitted is that some of these vegetables were not arranged in rows, but planted like orchards, for they grew much like trees. The Benedictine monks, diligently adhering to these orders, established monastery gardens from St. Gall in Switzerland to Canterbury in England, cultivating vegetables destined to outlive them. These plants developed woody stems, reaching heights of 6, 10, or even 20 feet. By the 1200s, these perennial giants had extended beyond monastic confines, appearing in manor gardens, and eventually in the plots of ambitious peasants. The accumulated knowledge was meticulously documented, illustrated in manuscripts, and refined over centuries. Then, around the turn of the 20th century, seed catalogs emerged, and we collectively forgot that vegetables could possess arboreal characteristics. Our first example, Walking Stick Kale, presents a striking image. Envision planting a cabbage seed that grows 6 feet tall in its inaugural year, then 8 feet in the second. By year 3, it towers over you, boasting a woody trunk as thick as your wrist, with leaves unfurling from its apex like palm fronds. You harvest its leaves for 3 years, and upon its eventual demise, you fell the trunk, dry it, varnish it, and utilize it as a walking stick for the subsequent 2 decades. This was the famous Walking Stick Kale, also known as Jersey kale, cultivated on the Channel Islands for over 500 years. Historical records confirm that just 5 such plants could feed 100 sheep, or 10 cows. Their leaves nourished livestock through winter, and their trunks were repurposed into tools. Nothing went to waste. Under optimal conditions, this plant could attain heights of 18 to 20 feet. Archaeological findings from Jersey reveal gardens specifically dedicated to these colossal plants, with their dried stalks being sold across England as canes. We subsequently replaced this 3-year multi-purpose crop with annual kale, which perishes after only 6 months, trading a potential walking stick for discarded dead stalks. Next, tree collards. While walking stick kale served livestock, tree collards were cultivated indefinitely for human consumption. Tree collards, Brassica oleracea asphylla, represent the longest living vegetable within the Brassica family. Plant a single cutting, and it will grow to 6 to 12 feet tall, living for 5 to 20 years, continuously producing leaves. Medieval monastery documents recount these plants being inherited through generations of monks. The same plant in the same location, feeding the same community for decades. The purple tree collard variety, still nurtured today by heritage seed savers, can withstand temperatures as low as -17 degrees Fahrenheit in unheated greenhouses. In North Africa, its region of origin, some specimens have been documented to live over 20 years. 20 years from a single plant, requiring no replanting or reseeding, only pruning and harvesting. Modern grocery stores sell collard greens for $3 per bunch. A medieval monk would surely scoff. His plant provided hundreds of pounds, free of charge, for decades, from just one cutting. Our third instance is tree kale, specifically Daubenton and perpetual. Their very names reveal their essence. Perpetual kale, also known as tree kale or branching cabbage, this variety was selectively bred never to flower, as a vegetable's flowering typically signals its demise. A kale that never flowers, however, never dies. Records from German monastery gardens describe Daubenton kale plants growing 6 to 10 feet tall and yielding leaves without interruption for 5 to 8 years. Their stems gradually became woody, forming a tree-like structure that necessitated staking, but delivered harvests even through the harshest winters. The National Trust preserves examples at historic garden sites across England, some of these plants having originated from cuttings taken from specimens documented in the 1800s, representing over 200 years of continuous cultivation. We replaced this perpetual producer with annual kale from seed packets, trading an eternal harvest for a single season's yield. Globe artichoke, our fourth entry, might be perceived as a specialized crop today, but medieval Italians regarded it as a perennial tree. Globe artichokes, Cinara cardunculus variety, Scolimus, were extensively cultivated across Mediterranean Europe by the 10th century. Plant a single crown, and it will grow 4 to 6 feet tall, with silvery gray leaves spanning 6 feet wide, producing flower buds, the edible artichokes, for 5 to 10 years, sometimes even longer. Medieval accounts from Andalusia detail artichoke orchards where plants were spaced like fruit trees and harvested annually for decades. These plants were considered so valuable that theft was severely punished. In 15th century Italian court documents, the act of pilfering artichoke crowns carried the same penalty as stealing livestock. Presently, commercial artichoke farms in California replant every 3 to 5 years, finding it more lucrative to sell new plants than to maintain older, thriving ones. We thus exchanged longevity for programmed obsolescence. Act 2 explores the realm of tall perennials. Our fifth vegetable, cardoon, was deemed essential if artichokes were valuable, as cardoons are the wild progenitor of artichokes and grow to an even greater size. Cardoon, Cinara cardunculus, was a dietary staple across medieval Europe. The plant grows 5 to 6 feet tall, boasting massive silvery blue leaves and vibrant purple thistle flowers. Every part of the plant was utilized. Its stems were blanched and consumed like celery, its flower buds harvested as small artichokes, and the flowers themselves produced enzymes crucial for cheesemaking. Monastery records from Provence indicate cardoon plants thriving for 10 to 15 years in the same location, necessitating minimal care. Plant once, mulch in winter, and harvest year after year. Documentation from medieval cheesemaking operations demonstrates that cardoon flowers were so prized that they were traded across regions. Portuguese Serra da Estrela cheese continues to employ cardoon rennet today, adhering to recipes over 800 years old. We have largely forgotten cardoon. Question 10 gardeners, and 9 will likely be unfamiliar with it. We abandoned a perennial thistle that provided food, cheesemaking ingredients, and ornamental flowers, all from a single plant for decades. Lovage reveals a medieval secret. They didn't rely on bouillon cubes. They had lovage. Lovage, Levisticum officinale, is a perennial herb and vegetable that reaches 6 feet in height, featuring celery-like leaves and an intensely savory flavor. A single plant yields enough leaves to season soups, stews, and broths for an entire household. Every part is edible: leaves like celery, stems like asparagus, seeds like fennel, and roots as vegetables or medicine. Moreover, it regenerates every spring for 10 to 20 years without requiring replanting. Medieval monastery gardens considered lovage indispensable. Charlemagne's Capitulare de Villis mandated its cultivation on every royal estate. Hildegard von Bingen prescribed it for ailments ranging from digestive issues to joint pain. Today, lovage is considered rare, with seed companies barely stocking it. We replaced a perennial flavor powerhouse that endured for decades with annual parsley and celery, which perish after a single season. We exchanged a perpetually free herb for dependence on grocery stores. Angelica, our seventh entry, holds a medieval legend that it bloomed on the feast day of Michael the Archangel and offered protection against plague. The medieval reality, however, attests to its growth to 8 feet and its ability to feed families for years. Angelica archangelica, was cultivated in every monastery physic garden. Its hollow stems were candied as sweets, its leaves flavored beer before hops became standard, and its roots served as medicine. The plant itself grew larger than a person. While technically a short-lived perennial lasting 2 to 3 years, Angelica self-seeded so reliably that medieval gardeners regarded it as permanent. Plant once, and it perpetually returned through its own seeds. During the Black Death, people carried Angelica roots for protection. Whether it truly fended off the plague is debatable. What is undeniable is that it provided food, medicine, and brewing ingredients from a single, towering plant. Modern herb gardens rarely include Angelica. It is deemed too large, too unusual, too medieval. We swapped an 8-foot multi-purpose giant for compact annual herbs that fit neatly into grocery store packaging. Act 3 focuses on the forever roots. Asparagus, our 8th vegetable, is familiar, but are you aware it is the oldest perennial vegetable still commonly cultivated? Asparagus officinalis, has been grown for over 2,000 years. Romans cultivated it, medieval monks cultivated it, and once planted, it produces spears each spring for 20 to 30 years, sometimes even longer. Medieval records describe asparagus beds passed down through generations. The same bed planted by a grandfather, harvested by his grandchildren. The plants, when allowed to fern, grew 3 to 5 feet tall, with root systems extending 10 feet deep, drawing nutrients from depths that annual vegetables cannot reach. Here's a little-known fact. Asparagus used to be even more perennial. Wild asparagus in Europe can live over 50 years. Commercial breeding, however, shortened its lifespan because shorter-lived varieties are simpler to replace and sell. We deliberately bred longevity out of asparagus to boost sales of new crowns. The medieval variety endured longer because no one was trying to accelerate its demise. Good King Henry. Before spinach gained popularity in Europe, there was Good King Henry. This perennial spinach of medieval Europe, scientifically known as Blitum bonus henricus, was named after a benevolent German monarch. Once planted, it reliably resurfaced every spring. Its arrow-shaped leaves emerged in early spring, a time when few other plants were growing. Medieval peasants often cultivated it near their homes for effortless harvesting, while monastery gardens documented its indispensability. Young shoots were consumed similarly to asparagus, mature leaves were prepared like spinach, and flower spikes were incorporated into soups. Unlike annual spinach, which rapidly bolts in summer warmth, Good King Henry continuously produced leaves from April through October. A single plant could provide greens for an entire family and endure for 10, 20, or even 30 years. Today, Good King Henry is nearly extinct, with seed companies rarely stocking it. The reason is simple. A vegetable that lasts for decades doesn't generate recurring sales. We exchanged enduring greens for annual spinach, which necessitates replanting 3 times annually, effectively trading longevity for profit. Vegetable 10. Skirret. This is a vegetable so esteemed that medieval kings cultivated dedicated gardens for it. Skirret, Sium cisarum, produces clusters of sweet, white roots, reminiscent of parsnips crossed with carrots, with a subtle hint of vanilla. King Henry IV maintained specific gardens for skirret, and medieval feast records frequently listed it as a delicacy. Unlike parsnips or carrots, skirret is a perennial. Once planted, its crown naturally divides, much like asparagus, yielding more roots each year. By harvesting some roots and leaving others, the plant persists indefinitely. Monastery records suggest skirret beds lasted between 15 and 20 years. The roots could remain in the ground throughout winter, providing fresh vegetables in January, when other produce was frozen. Today, skirret has largely disappeared. It's unavailable in stores, and most seed companies do not carry it. We have forgotten a prized perennial root vegetable that kings cherished, that lasted for decades and required no replanting. Why? Because the seed industry cannot profit from a vegetable that only needs to be planted once. Act 4. The Great Forgetting. Why we abandoned permanence. When European colonists arrived in America, they brought seeds, but not established systems. The labor-intensive methods of medieval monastery gardens were impractical in a world of abundant land, where depleted soil could simply be abandoned. By the 1800s, American gardening had become purely utilitarian. Plant annuals, harvest, and move on. Perennial vegetables were considered old-world luxuries, demanding too much patience. Subsequently, the seed industry emerged. By 1900, companies like Burpee and Ferry Morse recognized a crucial point. Perennial vegetables were detrimental to business. A customer who plants walking stick kale once and harvests it for 3 years makes only a single seed purchase. In contrast, a customer who plants annual kale buys seeds every single year. Consequently, catalogs ceased listing perennials. Agricultural colleges discontinued teaching about them, and the USDA focused solely on annuals. Within 2 generations, vegetables that had sustained Europe for a millennium vanished from American awareness. The industry trap. Examine any seed catalog today. You'll find hundreds of annual vegetables. Tomatoes, peppers, lettuce, beans, all dying by November. Count the perennials, and you'll likely find only asparagus, rhubarb, and perhaps artichokes if you're fortunate. This is not coincidental. It's by design. The modern seed industry thrives on annuals because annuals mandate annual purchases. Your dependence is their revenue. Medieval farmers planted once and harvested for decades. Modern gardeners replant every spring and wonder about the expense. We didn't abandon perennial vegetables because they were ineffective. We abandoned them precisely because they worked too well to be profitable. Act 5. The Path Forward. What we lost. What we can reclaim. 10 vegetables, centuries of cultivation, forgotten in less than a century. But here's what seed catalogs won't disclose. These plants still exist. Heritage seed savers and specialized nurseries continue to maintain them. You can procure walking stick kale seeds, order tree collard cuttings, and locate good King Henry, skirret, and lovage. The knowledge is not lost. It's simply overlooked. The moment you plant a tree collard that will feed you for 20 years, you cease purchasing collard seeds. The moment you establish a lovage plant that produces for decades, you stop buying celery and parsley. The moment you realize vegetables can be perennial, you liberate yourself from annual seed purchases. And that is precisely what they prefer you not to know. Start with 1. You don't need a medieval monastery to cultivate these vegetables. Begin with 1. Plant a tree collard cutting and observe it grow 10 feet tall over 5 years. Establish an asparagus bed that your grandchildren will eventually harvest. Try good King Henry, and eliminate the need to replant spinach 3 times each summer. Every perennial you incorporate reduces your reliance on annual inputs, closing the loop a bit more. Each one reconnects you to knowledge that nourished Europe for centuries. While modern agriculture depletes soil in mere decades, a crucial question remains unasked. Medieval farmers weren't flawless. Life was harsh, and winters were brutal. Yet their vegetable gardens functioned effectively. They sustained families for generations, without exhausting the soil, without requiring constant purchases, and without dying each autumn. We abandoned them not because they failed, but because they succeeded too permanently. A farmer with tree collards doesn't buy new collard plants annually. A farmer with perennial vegetables isn't dependent on seed companies. So the question is, what else have we forgotten because it worked too well to be commercialized? The answer might be growing in a neglected monastery garden, awaiting someone to rediscover it. Please share your thoughts below.